Welcome back to Just One Question. And it's rare that I get an opportunity like this with somebody who I've known for as many years as I've known our next guest, Dr. Vince Molinaro. And he is a speaker. He's an author. He's the founder and CEO of Leadership Contract, Inc. And we're here today to talk about one of his books. In fact, the most recent, which was published in September, entitled Community of Leaders, What It Takes to Drive Strategy, Culture, and Change. So Vince, first of all, welcome to Just One Question. How the heck are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Nick. Really appreciate your generosity.
It is indeed a pleasure. And let's jump right into it. What inspired you? You've been writing and talking and working with people for many years on leadership and what it takes to have good leadership around the world, because your work takes you all over the world. What inspired you in this case to write The Community of Leaders?
Well, it really, the answer kind of goes back to another book, The Leadership Contract, which was released in 2013. And that book really was my attempt at trying to solve a chronic problem that I was seeing with organizations that we were working with. And this was, coming out of the great financial crisis, humans tend to reevaluate everything, right? Similar to what many of us did coming out of the pandemic. But back then, what I was seeing was this very specific reevaluation as it tied to leadership development. And I was seeing this frustration among CEOs and heads of human resources and talent around, we're investing in leadership development, but we're not seeing it translate into better leadership, and we don't know what's going on. And that was the problem. And then as I kept hearing that over and over again, it became clear there's something fundamental happening here. And as we started to think about, and I started to think about what's going on, what became clear to me was that there is this there was a pattern on how people got into leadership roles, which was, one with a great technical expert. They get promoted because of that technical expertise, and very little support is provided. And what ends up happening is you're in role and don't really understand what it means to be a leader. And that's when I realized, we haven't made this explicit to people in leadership roles. That is, when you take on a leadership role, you sign up for something really important. There's an implicit contract. And that's what really, that idea kind of spurred on that book. And like a contract, it comes with a set of terms and conditions. It starts with a very deliberate decision to kind of define yourself as a leader and demonstrate ownership. It comes with obligation. It's a lot of hard work. And this idea of it's a community, that the new model of leadership is, we're not leading as individual heroes. We've got to work together with other leaders in our organization to drive our strategy, to drive priorities. And so the book got released. It immediately resonated. It had a strong message on individual accountability. And I immediately saw people starting to gravitate around this idea of leadership as a community. Fast forward a number of years as we started implementing these ideas into companies around the world, the feedback we started getting was, this is great for individual accountability, but we see leaders struggling with team and shared accountability. Team accountability is, how do they build an accountable team? And shared accountability is, how do leaders work across functions and departments when they've got common priorities and they've got to figure out the rules of the road, and it's pretty murky, and many of them struggle to do that. So that inspired the book Accountable Leaders, which was out in June of 2020. And then coming out of the pandemic, the notion of community just started to gain influence over and over and over again. And I realized I needed to do a deep dive on how do companies really create a strong leadership culture defined as a strong community of leaders. So it was really now inspired to help organizations do something that they're really looking to do, which is build as strong of a leadership culture that they can. So that's the long answer to the question of what inspired the new book.
So the leadership contract included this thinking about community of leaders. It was important even then. And now you've gone on to write this whole book about it. You've devoted more space to it. And what's changed? Why is community of leaders so important now?
Well, the reason, based on our research, is really the complexity and the pressures that leaders are facing. In our research that's covered in the book, we really look at the enormous strategic challenges that companies and leaders are facing, and it's everything from transforming their business model, driving accelerated growth, dealing with threats from new competitors, on and on and on and on and on. But what we find is it's not one thing that leaders identify that they're dealing with. It's multiple, on average 3.2 items that get identified. So there's this confluence of strategic challenges that leaders are dealing with. In the book, I referenced talking to a senior executive in the telecom space who had shared, our company's at an existential crisis moment. We have never seen this degree of change. And then, she said, it feels like the title of that movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. And that's kind of what it feels like. That's sort of that visceral anxiety that many leaders are facing now. And so then what happens is the recognition that in order to be successful, it's not going to be one leader who's going to have the answer or do all the work. They need a strong leadership culture, really defined as a sense of, this community of leaders in order to effectively drive strategy, change, and culture. So that's sort of the rationale around that. And our research also validates it. 88.7% of the senior executives admit that having a strong leadership culture is going to be critical to their future success. 83.6% said we need to transform what we have because we don't feel we're confident that what we have is going to get us there. And only 49.5% feel confident that they're actually able to transform their leadership culture. So that creates doubt, that creates risk, or as I describe in the book, that creates what I call leadership dread disorder, this very palpable sense of anxiety that senior executives realize that when they don't have what they need to drive strategy and execute their priorities. I've been in too many rooms where I've seen it and felt that among leaders. The good news is Community of Leaders provides a very practical way on how to build a strong leadership culture within a company.
You use a particularly powerful metaphor to describe what a community of leaders can be like when it is working. And it's something that there's a palpable hunger for. Can you tell us what that metaphor is and why it's important?
And I don't know what your experience has been in the writing process, but it's always fascinating how something that you may have encountered years ago comes back and has tremendous relevance. And that happened to me years back when I saw the movie Witness. It starred Harrison Ford and Kelly Ellis. And Harrison Ford played a Philadelphia cop who goes undercover in rural Pennsylvania in an Amish community where there has been a murder, and he's there to investigate it. So he essentially goes undercover. And the story plays out of him and what he deals with. Well, there's a moment where they reenact a barn raising. And I knew of what a barn raising was. I knew of the concept. I'd never seen one live, but knew of it. And they reenact it. And when I saw that, I just remember it kind of like, wow, this is a powerful metaphor of a group of people coming together to do the extraordinary. And they basically raise a barn in one day. So when I started writing this book, I kind of go, oh, I wonder if there's anything in that moment, in that movie that could be relevant here. So I started doing my research. What I learned is it came to North America from the UK. It was a tradition practiced by the Amish and Mennonite communities in rural Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and parts of Ontario, where I'm based. And what's fascinating about it is, back then, most families were in agriculture and farming, and having a barn was vital to your survival. But a barn was too big of an endeavor for a family to do on its own. And so they needed everybody to join. The whole community comes together in a day. So where there was once an empty field early in the morning as the sun is rising, by the end of the day is a fully constructed barn.
Mm.
And everyone has a role to play, no matter how big or how small.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as I continued to do the research, what surprised me was that act of community of people coming together to do the extraordinary, that act of community of people coming together to do the extraordinary is only possible because of accountability. And when I learned that, I said, wait a minute, this is how can this work I've been doing on leadership accountability over the last 15 years and now community kind of come together in a pretty profound way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what was surprising. In addition to that, our research shows, based on our measures, that the constructs of accountability and community are positively correlated. So not only does it kind of make intuitive sense and it's hardwired in a barn raising tradition, the data also supports it. And so that was kind of like all of these things kind of coming together.
It's a metaphor that just continues to resonate for me as I've gotten to know the book, and also I can't resist adding, ladies and gentlemen, Vince recently did a TEDx talk that we hope will be out soon. Perhaps by the time you see this, it will be out, about this idea of a community of leaders, and that connects to barn raising. So check that one out. I'll put the link in the notes, assuming that the timing all works out. And meanwhile, check out Vince's book, Community of Leaders, What It Takes to Drive Strategy, Culture, and Change. Vince, thank you so much for being on Just One Question.
Thanks so much, Dr. Nick. Really appreciate it. As I said, your generosity and your time. Thank you.